The Texas sun hung low in the sky like a burning copper coin, casting long shadows across the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge. The year was 1870, and the frontier town sat on the edge of civilization, where the last traces of order met the wild expanse of Comanche territory. Purple and orange streaked across the horizon as evening approached, and somewhere in the distance, wolves began their nightly chorus, a sound that still made folks shutter their windows tight. Margaret Maggie Sullivan stood on the porch of her family's modest homestead, shading her eyes against the dying light. At 19, she had already seen more hardship than most women twice her age. Her calloused hands spoke of endless days tending crops and mending fences, while the weathered Winchester propped against the doorframe told another story, one of vigilance and loss. It had been 2 years since outlaws had gunned down her father, Thomas Sullivan, on this very porch. 2 years since she'd taken on the burden of keeping the small ranch running, caring for her ailing mother and younger brother. Samuel, the boy, barely 14, tried his best to fill their father's boots, but Maggie knew the weight fell heaviest on her shoulders. "Margaret, supper's ready," her mother called weakly from inside. Elizabeth Sullivan had never fully recovered from the shock of losing her husband. The frontier had a way of breaking people, and Maggie watched her mother fade a little more each day, like prairie grass bleaching under the relentless sun. "Coming, Ma," Maggie replied, but her attention remained fixed on the horizon. Something felt different tonight. The air carried an electric charge, like the moments before a thunderstorm, though the sky remained clear. Throughout the valley, tensions between the white settlers and the Comanche had reached a breaking point. Recent raids on both sides had left a trail of blood and vengeance that poisoned every interaction. Just last week, the Hendersons' barn had been burned, and 3 days ago, a Comanche hunting party had been ambushed near Willow Creek. Each act of violence begat another, a cycle as predictable as the seasons and twice as harsh. After supper, as her mother dozed in a rocking chair and Samuel cleaned his rifle, Maggie noticed their mare, Buttercup, was missing from the corral. The horse had a habit of wandering, especially when the gate latch came loose, something Maggie had meant to fix for weeks. "Sam, Buttercup's gone again," she said, reaching for her father's old hat. "I'll go fetch her before it gets too dark." "Want me to come?" Samuel asked, though his voice betrayed his reluctance. The boy had inherited their mother's fear of the night, of what might lurk beyond the circle of lamplight. "No need. She never goes far. Probably down by the creek, eating that sweet grass she likes." Maggie grabbed a rope halter and her father's Colt revolver, checking the chambers before sliding it into her belt. "I'll be back before you know it." The temperature dropped quickly once the sun disappeared behind the hills. Maggie followed Buttercup's tracks easily enough. The mare's distinctive gait left a pattern she knew well. The trail led toward the grove of cottonwoods that marked the boundary between settled land and the wild country beyond. As she entered the trees, the familiar sounds of evening, crickets, the distant call of a night bird, suddenly ceased. The silence pressed against her ears like cotton. Even her footsteps seemed muffled in the thick dust. Maggie's hand instinctively moved to the Colt's grip. Then she saw him. The Comanche warrior stood motionless beside Buttercup, one hand resting on the mare's neck. In the ethereal light of the rising moon filtering through the leaves, he seemed almost otherworldly, a figure carved from shadow and silver. He was young, perhaps a few years older than herself, with long black hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes that reflected the moonlight like a wolf's. Maggie's breath caught in her throat. Every story she'd heard, every warning her father had given, screamed at her to draw her gun, to run, to scream for help. But something in the warrior's stance, the complete absence of aggression, the way he simply stood there as if he'd been waiting, kept her frozen. They regarded each other across the space of 20 feet, two young people from different worlds brought together by chance and a wandering horse. The warrior's face remained impassive, but his eyes held no hatred, no malice. Instead, Maggie saw something she hadn't expected, a profound stillness, like the deep quiet of the mountains before dawn. Slowly, carefully. The warrior stepped away from Buttercup. His movements were fluid, deliberate, designed not to startle. He wore traditional dress, buckskin leggings, a breechcloth, and a vest decorated with intricate beadwork that caught the moonlight. A knife hung at his belt, but his hands remained visible, empty. "Your horse," he said in heavily accented English, gesturing toward Buttercup. His voice was deep, quiet as the wind through grass. Maggie's heart hammered against her ribs, but she managed to nod. "Yes, thank you." The words came out as barely a whisper. The warrior studied her with those dark, fathomless eyes. Then, without warning, he smiled, just a slight upturn at the corners of his mouth. But it transformed his face entirely. He looked younger, almost boyish, and Maggie felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "You are Thomas Sullivan's daughter," he said. It wasn't a question. The mention of her father's name sent a chill down Maggie's spine. "You knew my father?" The warrior nodded slowly. "He gave water to my uncle. 2 summers passed, when others would have let him die." Maggie remembered that day, her father returning home with blood on his shirt, talking in hushed tones with her mother about finding a wounded Indian by the road. Thomas Sullivan had been a hard man, shaped by the frontier, but he'd also possessed a streak of decency that sometimes put him at odds with their neighbors. "My uncle lived," the warrior continued. "He spoke of Thomas Sullivan's kindness before he joined the spirits last winter. An understanding passed between them, a recognition that not all stories were written in black and white, that even on the frontier, small acts of humanity could bridge the widest chasms." "What's your name?" Maggie asked, surprising herself with the question. The warrior hesitated, then spoke a series of syllables in his own language that Maggie couldn't hope to pronounce. Seeing her struggle, he added, "Your people call me Silent Crow. I'm Margaret." "Maggie," she said, then felt foolish for the unnecessary clarification. Silent Crow inclined his head in acknowledgement. Behind him, the moon had risen fully, bathing the grove in silver light. The wolves had resumed their calling, but the sound no longer seemed threatening, merely part of the night's symphony. "You should not be here alone," Silent Crow said. "These are dangerous times. I can take care of myself," Maggie replied, her hand still resting on the colt. That slight smile appeared again. "Yes, I see this, but danger comes in many forms. Not all carry weapons." He moved toward his horse, a painted pony Maggie hadn't noticed. So still had it been standing in the shadows. As he gathered the reins, he paused, looking back at her. "The moon will be full in 7 nights, he said. "The Cottonwoods remember many stories. Perhaps they will share them." Before Maggie could respond, he had mounted and melted into the darkness, leaving only the whisper of hoofbeats on sand. She stood there for a long moment, Buttercup's lead rope forgotten in her hand, trying to make sense of what had just happened. When she finally returned home, Samuel was waiting on the porch, rifle in hand. "What took so long?" Ma was getting worried. "Buttercup wandered farther than usual," Maggie said, leading the mare to the corral. "Down past the Cottonwoods." "You shouldn't go that far alone," Samuel said, echoing Silent Crow's warning. "Especially not with the Comanches stirring up trouble." Maggie secured the gate, checking the latch twice. "Not all of them are looking for trouble. Sam." Her brother gave her a sharp look. "You sound like Pa used to." Look where that got him. The words stung, but Maggie couldn't argue. Their father's death had come from outlaws, not Indians. But the lesson was the same. The frontier didn't reward trust easily. That night, Maggie lay awake listening to the familiar sounds of the house settling, her mother's labored breathing from the next room, Samuel's restless movements as he dreamed. But her mind kept returning to the grove, to eyes that held the stillness of mountains, to a voice like wind through grass. 7 nights until the full moon. The Cottonwoods remember many stories. She pressed her face into her pillow, trying to banish the thought. Whatever Silent Crow had meant, whatever invitation lay hidden in his words, she couldn't afford to consider it. She had responsibilities, A family to protect, a reputation to maintain in a town that would never understand. But as sleep finally claimed her, Maggie dreamed of moonlight through leaves and the profound peace she'd glimpsed in a stranger's eyes. A peace she hadn't felt since before her father's death. A peace she hadn't even known she'd been seeking. The days following their encounter passed like honey dripping from a spoon. Slow, golden, and impossibly sweet. Maggie found herself volunteering for every task that might take her near the cottonwood grove. Gathering kindling, checking for stray cattle, fetching water from the creek that ran clearer upstream. Any excuse would do. On the third day, she saw him again. She was collecting dried branches when she sensed his presence, not heard. For Silent Crow moved like his namesake's shadow. When she turned, he stood 20 paces away, watching her with those deep, still eyes. "You came back," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The wood is dry here," he replied, gesturing to the branches in her arms. "Good for fire." It was such a mundane observation that Maggie almost laughed. Here they were, two people from warring worlds, discussing kindling like neighbors over a fence. "My mother needs it for cooking," she said. "The stove burns through wood quickly." Silent Crow moved closer, his movements unhurried. He selected a fallen branch, examined it, then broke it into manageable pieces with his hands. The casual display of strength made Maggie's breath catch. "Your mother is ill," he said. It wasn't a question. "How did you—" Maggie stopped. Of course he knew. The Comanche had been watching the settlements just as the settlers watched them. "Yes, since my father died." Silent Crow placed the broken wood with her pile. Grief is a sickness of the spirit. Sometimes it claims the body too. They worked in companionable silence, gathering wood. When Maggie's arms were full, Silent Crow produced a leather cord from somewhere and bound the bundle efficiently. His fingers brushed hers during the process, brief contact that sent an unexpected jolt through her. "Thank you," she managed. He studied her face. "You have your father's eyes, but not his fear. My father wasn't afraid. All men fear. Your father feared for others more than himself. This is good fear, noble fear." Before Maggie could respond, he had melted back into the trees. She stood there, bundle of wood in her arms, wondering if she'd imagined the whole encounter. But the leather cord was real. She ran her fingers over it that night, noting the careful workmanship, the way it had been cut from larger piece, perhaps a garment or bag, a practical gift, but a gift nonetheless. Their meetings became a dangerous routine, never planned, never spoken of. But somehow Maggie would find herself near the cottonwoods when the sun hung low, and more often than not, Silent Crow would materialize from the landscape like morning mist taking form. They began to exchange more than glances and carefully chosen words. Silent Crow showed her which plants could ease her mother's pain, drawing simple pictures in the dirt to ensure she understood. Maggie shared water from her canteen, and once, daringly, a piece of cornbread wrapped in cloth. He ate it slowly, thoughtfully. "Your grain is different from ours," he said. "Sweeter, like your words." "I don't speak sweetly," Maggie protested. "Ask anyone in town. They'll tell you I'm sharp-tongued as a rattler." That rare smile appeared. "Rattlers speak truth. This is not sharp. This is honest." Slowly, in fragments, she learned about him. His name in his own language meant something closer to Crow who brings silence, or Crow of quiet moments. He struggled to translate the concept. He was 23 winters old, had earned his warrior status at 17, and had lost his own father to soldier bullets 2 years past. "We have this in common," he said quietly. "Children of violent loss." One evening, a week before the full moon, Maggie found him teaching his horse a new gait. The painted pony moved in precise patterns, responding to signals so subtle she couldn't detect them. "He's beautiful," she said. Silent Crow corrected with amusement. "Her name means dancer in moonlight." "All your names are poetry," Maggie observed. "All names should mean something. Margaret, what does this mean?" Maggie flushed. "It means pearl. My mother chose it. Said I was her precious pearl in this rough country. Pearl. He said it carefully, as if tasting the word. From the water, smooth, valuable, hidden inside sharp shell. Yes, this fits. The compliment, if that's what it was, made her cheeks burn hotter. As the full moon approached, their conversations grew longer, deeper. Silent Crow spoke English with increasing confidence, though he sometimes paused to find the right word. He told her about the Comanche way of life, the freedom of following buffalo, the sacred nature of horses, the importance of dreams. Your people build walls, he said one evening, gesturing toward the distant town. Wood, stone, laws, fear, all walls. Walls keep us safe, Maggie argued. Walls keep you separate, from land, from each other, from spirit. A man behind walls forgets he is part of all things. She wanted to argue, but couldn't. Hadn't she felt trapped behind those very walls? Hadn't she yearned for something beyond the narrow confines of Cedar Ridge's expectations? 2 nights before the full moon, Silent Crow taught her 3 words in his language. The first meant friend, the second meant trust, the third he wouldn't translate. What does it mean? She pressed. Something not yet ready for words in your tongue. He said, maybe after moonrise is full. That night, as she lay in bed, Maggie practiced the unfamiliar syllables, especially the mysterious third word. It felt like holding a secret on her tongue, sweet and dangerous as stolen honey. The day before the full moon, everything changed. Maggie was returning from the general store when she noticed the crowd gathered outside the sheriff's office. Mrs. Henderson stood in the center, her voice shrill with indignation. Saw her with my own eyes, out by the cottonwoods, talking to one of them savages like they were old friends. Maggie's blood ran cold. Sheriff Watson, a fair man but one who bent with the prevailing winds, raised his hands for calm. Now, Mrs. Henderson, you sure about what you saw? Sure as sunrise. That Sullivan girl, bold as brass, consorting with the enemy. Her father's probably turning in his grave. Maggie forced herself to walk steadily. Not to run, but Mrs. Henderson's sharp eyes found her. There she is. Ask her yourself. Sheriff, ask her what business she has meeting with Comanche warriors in secret. All eyes turned to Maggie. She saw judgment in some, curiosity in others, and in a few, a ugly anticipation of scandal. Sheriff Watson approached, his expression carefully neutral. Miss Sullivan, I'm sure there's an explanation for this. Maggie's mind raced. Denial would be the easy path, but Mrs. Henderson wouldn't have made such a public accusation without certainty. I've encountered a Comanche near our property, she said evenly. He's done no harm. In fact, he helped me retrieve our horse when she wandered. Helped you? Mrs. Henderson scoffed. Next you'll be inviting them for Sunday dinner. That's enough. Mrs. Henderson, the sheriff said. Miss Sullivan, I'm going to have to ask you to be more careful. These are dangerous times. Even peaceful encounters can be misunderstood, or they can lead to worse. Mr. Jameson, the bank owner, added. Remember what happened to the Parker's girl? Taken captive. Lived with them for years. When they finally got her back, she was more savage than civilized. No one's taking anyone captive, Maggie said firmly. I appreciate your concern, but I can handle myself. She walked away, spine straight, feeling the weight of their stares. Behind her, she heard Mrs. Henderson mutter, Apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Her father was too soft on them, too. That evening, Maggie didn't go to the cottonwoods. She helped her mother with dinner, mended Samuel's torn shirt, and tried to ignore the moon rising outside her window. One night short of full, Samuel, who'd heard the talk in town, confronted her as she prepared for bed. Is it true? Have you been meeting with a Comanche? Maggie met her brother's eyes. Would it be so terrible if I had? Are you mad? Samuel's voice cracked with adolescent emotion. They killed Pa. Outlaws killed Pa. White men, or have you forgotten? Indians. Outlaws. What's the difference? They're all dangerous. So are we, Maggie said quietly. So is everyone, given cause. Samuel stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. "I don't understand you anymore. Maggie, it's like you want to get hurt, or worse, get us all hurt." After he stormed out, Maggie sat on her bed, head in her hands. He was right, of course. She was risking everything: her reputation, her family's safety, perhaps their very place in the community. For what? Stolen moments with a man she could never truly be with. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Silent Crow's face, heard his voice saying the third word, the one without translation, whatever it meant. She knew with bone-deep certainty that tomorrow night, when the moon rose full, she would be there to learn its meaning, even if it cost her everything. The next day passed in a haze of chores and careful normalcy. Maggie felt the town's eyes on her everywhere: at the well, in the store, passing on the street. Some neighbors who usually chatted turned away. Others watched with naked curiosity, waiting for her next scandal. As evening approached and the full moon began its climb, Maggie made her decision. She told her mother she needed to check on a sick calf in the barn, a lie that tasted bitter but necessary. The cottonwoods stood silver-bathed and mystical under the moon's bright face, and there, as if conjured from moonbeam and shadow, stood Silent Crow. "You came," he said simply. "I almost didn't. The town knows. They're watching me now. Fear makes them watch, fear of what they do not understand." He stepped closer, and in the moonlight, she could see he'd dressed with extra care. His hair was freshly braided, adorned with a single crow feather. New beadwork decorated his vest. "Are you afraid?" he asked. Maggie considered lying, then decided he deserved truth. "Yes, but not of you. I'm afraid of what this means. What it could cost. All things of value have cost," Silent Crow said. "The third word I taught you, do you remember?" She spoke it carefully, the unfamiliar syllables rolling off her tongue. He smiled fully then, an expression that transformed his solemn features. "It means heart calling to heart, when one spirit recognizes another across all barriers." Maggie's breath caught. "Silent Crow! In my language, we have another word." He continued, moving closer still. "It means the moment when the moon kisses the earth with its light. This moment, now." He raised one hand slowly, giving her time to step back. When she didn't, his fingers touched her cheek. "Featherlight. Among my people, when a warrior speaks this word to a woman under the full moon, it is a promise, a claiming, a question." "What are you asking?" Maggie whispered. "Only what you can give, only what your heart permits." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I know the dangers. I know what your people would do, what mine might do. But the moon sees truth, not the walls men build." Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. "This is impossible." "Many things seem impossible until they are not." He cupped her face gently in both hands. "Your father gave water to my uncle. Perhaps the spirits meant for us to give something to each other. What could we possibly give each other except heartache?" "This," he said, and leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was gentle as moonlight itself, a bare brush of lips that somehow held more power than any storm. Maggie felt it in her bones, her blood, the very center of her being, a rightness that defied all logic, all expectation, all fear. When they parted, Silent Crow rested his forehead against hers. "Midnight kiss," he murmured, and she realized he'd learned those English words just for this moment. "The town will never accept this," she said, eyes still closed. "My family. Tonight, there is no town, no family, only moon, only us, only truth." He pulled back to look at her. "I do not ask for tomorrow. I ask only for this moment, under the moon." True. Maggie opened her eyes, seeing him clearly in the silver light, this warrior who spoke in poetry, who moved like wind, who offered her a glimpse of a world beyond walls. "One midnight kiss," she agreed. "And whatever comes after, comes." They stood there under the cottonwoods, two souls from different worlds sharing a moment outside of time. The moon blessed them with its light, and for those precious minutes, nothing else existed. No feuds, no fear, no impossible futures. Only the truth of heart calling to heart across every barrier mankind could build. The morning after the full moon brought news that shattered Cedar Ridge's uneasy peace. 3 ranches near the border had been raided in the night, cattle stolen, barns burned. 1 settler wounded by an arrow. By noon, the town square buzzed with angry voices demanding retribution. Maggie stood at the general store counter, her hands trembling as she counted out coins for flour. Behind her, she could hear Mr. Jameson holding court. "I say we form a militia. Hunt them down before they strike again. The army's too slow, too soft. We need to protect ourselves." Heard the Sullivan girl was seen with one of them. Another voice added, "Maybe she knows something about these raids." Maggie's spine stiffened, but she kept her eyes on the counter. Mr. Porter, the shopkeeper, gave her a sympathetic look as he handed her the flour sack. "Don't pay them no mind, Miss Margaret," he said quietly. "Fear makes folks say foolish things." But when she turned to leave, she found her path blocked by Mrs. Henderson and 2 other women from the church committee. "Margaret Sullivan." "Mrs." Henderson's voice rang with authority. "We need to have a word." "I'm needed at home," Maggie said, trying to step around them. "Your mother needs more than flour, Mrs." Henderson continued. "She needs a daughter with sense, one who doesn't bring shame on her family name." "I've done nothing shameful." "Haven't you?" Mrs. Thompson, the preacher's wife, clutched her shawl tighter. "Consorting with heathens? Your poor mother, ill as she is, having to bear such scandal. If you're so concerned about my mother, perhaps you should visit her." Maggie shot back. "Oh, wait, none of you have set foot in our home since my father died. Too busy gossiping to practice Christian charity." She pushed past them. "But Mrs. Henderson's voice followed her. "Mark my words, girl, no good comes from savage love. Ask any woman who's been taken by them, if they even live to tell." Maggie fled, the flour sack heavy in her arms. Heavier still the weight of their judgment. At home, she found Samuel cleaning his rifle with grim determination. "You heard about the raids?" he asked without looking up. "I heard." "Mr. Jameson's forming a hunting party. I'm joining." "Sam, no." "You're 14, old enough to protect what's ours." He finally met her eyes. "Since you seem determined to endanger it." The accusation stung worse than any slap. "I've endangered nothing. I've done nothing wrong." "You met with him again last night. Don't deny it. I saw you leave." Maggie set down the flour with careful control. "What I do is my business. Not when it puts us all at risk." Samuel's voice cracked. "They're saying things in town. Maggie, saying maybe you're passing information, telling them which ranches to hit. That's ridiculous." "Is it? You disappear for hours. You defend them. You—" His voice broke entirely. "You're all I have left besides Ma. I can't lose you too." The raw fear in his voice dissolved her anger. She pulled her brother into an embrace, feeling how he trembled despite his brave front. "You won't lose me," she promised. "I swear it." But even as she held him, Maggie wondered if it was a promise she could keep. 3 days passed without her returning to the cottonwoods. 3 days of sidelong glances, whispered conversations that ceased when she approached, doors that closed a little too quickly. The pressure built like storm clouds on the horizon. Her mother, sensing the tension, called Maggie to her bedside on the 3rd evening. "What's troubling you, child?" Elizabeth Sullivan's voice was weak, but her eyes remained sharp. "Nothing, Ma. Just worried about the raids." Her mother studied her with a penetrating gaze that had always seen through pretense. "Your father used to get the same look when he was wrestling with his conscience. Usually meant he was about to do something that went against the grain. Pa always did what was right. Right isn't always simple. Margaret, sometimes it's the hardest path of all." Her mother's thin hand found hers. "I won't be here much longer." "Don't say that. Hush, listen. When I'm gone, you'll have choices to make. Don't let fear choose for you. Not the town's fear, not your own. Your father understood that. It's why he gave water to that wounded man, even knowing what folks would say. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. Ma, I know, child. Mothers always know. Elizabeth squeezed her hand weakly. Just be careful. The world's not ready for some kinds of understanding. Maybe it never will be. That night, as Maggie sat by her window watching clouds scud across the moon, she heard it, distant but unmistakable, the sound of drums echoing across the valley. Comanche drums, carrying a message she couldn't decode but felt in her bones. Samuel burst into her room. You hear that? They're gathering, planning something. Or mourning something, Maggie said quietly. Or celebrating. Or any of a dozen things drums might mean. It means trouble. Samuel insisted. Mr. Jameson says, Mr. Jameson's never spent a moment trying to understand them. He only knows fear. Maybe fear's what keeps us alive. The drums continued through the night, a rhythm that worked its way into Maggie's dreams. She saw a silent crow dancing around a fire, his movements telling stories she couldn't read. She saw her father offering water to a wounded man. She saw walls crumbling, rivers running red, and through it all, the steady beat of hearts disguised as drums. The next morning brought terrible news. The militia, riding out in the pre-dawn darkness, had attacked a Comanche camp, but it hadn't been a war party. It had been families. Women and children gathered for a ceremony. 3 were dead, including a young mother. The warriors had retaliated swiftly, and now 2 militiamen lay wounded. 1, critically. The town square filled with shouting voices, grief and rage mixing into something poisonous. Maggie watched from the store window as Mr. Jameson rallied the crowd. This is war now. They draw first blood. We answer. No mercy for savages. But we attacked first. A lone voice protested. Young doctor. Bryant, new to town and still naive enough to speak truth. We killed women and children. Indian women birth Indian warriors. Someone shouted back, Nits make lice. The ugly phrase made Maggie's stomach turn. She thought of Silent Crow, of the gentleness in his hands, the poetry in his words. How could they reduce such humanity to vermin? That night, despite everything, despite the danger and the madness gripping the town, Maggie found herself walking toward the cottonwoods. She had to warn him, had to know he was safe, but when she reached the grove, it was empty. Only the wind answered her whispered call. She waited until the moon set, hope dying with its light. As she turned to leave, she saw it, an arrow embedded in the largest cottonwood. Not a weapon, but a message. Tied to the shaft was a small bundle of sage and a crow feather. With shaking hands, she freed the bundle. The sage smelled of ceremony, of sacred things. The feather was perfect, black as midnight with an iridescent sheen, and wrapped in the sage was a small piece of deerskin with symbols she couldn't read but understood nonetheless. A goodbye. Maggie pressed the bundle to her chest, tears flowing freely. Somewhere in the darkness, drums still called. But now she heard them differently. Not a war cry, but a lament, a grieving, a farewell to what might have been. She tucked the precious bundle inside her coat and walked home through a world that suddenly seemed emptier, colder, despite the warm night air. Behind her, the cottonwoods rustled with secrets they would keep forever. In town, the militia prepared for war. In her heart, Maggie prepared for a different kind of battle, one against the hatred that would destroy everything beautiful and true, everything that transcended the artificial boundaries men drew with blood and fear. The drums faded with distance, but their rhythm lived on in her heartbeat, and in that rhythm was a promise, not of reunion, perhaps, but of remembrance. Some things, once touched by moonlight, could never be fully lost to darkness. Silent Crow was gone, driven away by the violence that seemed inevitable as sunrise. But the kiss they'd shared, the understanding they'd found beneath the full moon, that remained, a secret more precious than pearls, hidden safe inside the sharp shell of her guarded heart. The town could have her days, her duties, her outward compliance, but her nights, her dreams, her true self. Those belonged to the memory of a warrior who spoke in poetry and moved like wind, who had shown her a world beyond walls before the walls closed in forever, or at least, so she thought that night, walking home with sage and feather and farewell clutched against her breaking heart. She couldn't know that drums, once started, have a way of calling across years and miles, summoning what was lost when the need grows desperate enough. For now, there was only ending, only goodbye, only the echo of what had been and the ache of what could never be. 5 years had passed since that night of drums and farewell. 5 years that aged Maggie far beyond her 24 summers. She stood at the kitchen window, watching dust devils dance across the barren yard, and tried to remember when she'd last seen real rain. The drought had come 2 years ago, turning the land from gold to gray, sucking life from soil and soul alike. Cattle died standing up, too weak to fall. Crops withered before they could properly sprout. The very air seemed to have forgotten the taste of water. "Maggie, the Mackenzie boy is here," Samuel called from the front room. She sighed, smoothing her faded calico dress. Robert Mackenzie had been courting her properly for 6 months now. A good man, stable, with enough money to weather hard times. The town approved. Her mother, in her final days, had encouraged it. Everyone said it was time Maggie settled down, forgot whatever foolishness had possessed her in youth. "Send him in, Sam." Her brother appeared in the doorway. No longer the frightened boy of 14, but a man of 19, hardened by drought and duty. They'd grown closer since their mother's passing 3 winters ago, bound by shared loss and the endless struggle to keep the ranch alive. Robert entered, hat in hand, his pleasant face creased with concern. "Afternoon. Maggie, how are you managing?" "Well enough," she lied smoothly. They were down to their last 3 head of cattle. The well was running low, and she'd already sold her mother's wedding ring to buy feed. "I brought some supplies from town," Robert said, gesturing to the porch. "Thought you might need them." Charity disguised as courting. Maggie forced a smile. "That's kind of you." He stepped closer, taking her work-worn hands in his soft ones. "Maggie, you can't keep this up. The ranch is dying. You're killing yourself trying to save it. It's my home. It doesn't have to be, not alone." His grip tightened. "Marry me. We'll combine our lands, pool our resources. Together we can survive this." It was the 3rd time he'd proposed. Each time, Maggie found new ways to delay, deflect, defer. But the walls were closing in, financial walls this time, built of debt and drought rather than prejudice. "I need time to think," she said, the same words as before. Robert's face hardened slightly. "Time's running out. Maggie, for all of us. The bank's calling in loans. Half the town's already packed up for California. Soon there won't be anything left to save." After he left, Maggie sat on the porch watching the sun set through a haze of dust. The horizon looked like old blood, tired and drained. She fingered the crow feather she still wore on a cord beneath her dress, her secret talisman, her reminder that once, for a brief moment, she'd touched something beyond the narrow confines of survival. That night, as sandstorms battered the windows, she dreamed again of drums, but these were different, urgent, commanding, calling not for ceremony but for action. She woke with her heart pounding, the taste of sage on her tongue. The next morning brought the kind of heat that killed hope before noon. Maggie was drawing the last bucket from the well when Samuel came running, rifle in hand. "Riders coming! Indians!" Her heart stopped, then resumed at double pace. "How many? Can't tell through the dust, but they're coming fast." They barricaded themselves inside, weapons ready. Through the window, Maggie watched the dust cloud approach, trying to count horses, trying to see. The riders materialized from the haze, 6 Comanche warriors in traditional dress, feathers and paint defiant against the apocalyptic landscape. And at their head, Maggie's rifle clattered to the floor. Silent Crow sat his horse like carved stone, older, harder, but unmistakably him. His eyes found hers through the window, and 5 years collapsed into nothing. "Don't shoot," she told Samuel. her voice barely working. "Whatever happens, don't shoot." She walked onto the porch, aware of the rifles trained on her from inside, aware of the warriors' hands near their weapons, aware of nothing but the man dismounting with fluid grace. He looked different. The boyish softness had been carved away by time and trial, leaving sharp angles and deep lines. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw. His hair was longer, decorated with more feathers, marks of status. She guessed. But his eyes still held that mountain stillness. "Margaret," he said, and her name on his lips after so long nearly buckled her knees. "You came back." The words emerged as a whisper. "The drums called." He gestured to the dying land around them. "The earth suffers. Sky forgets rain. This is larger than old fights." Samuel appeared in the doorway, rifle lowered but ready. "Maggie, what's happening?" "It's all right. Sam." She never took her eyes off Silent Crow. "This is an old friend." Her brother's sharp intake of breath told her he'd made the connection. "Him, after all this time?" Silent Crow spoke in rapid Comanche to his companions. They remained mounted but visibly relaxed. Then he turned back to Maggie. "I bring an offer, from my people to yours." "What kind of offer?" "We know where water sleeps deep, old places, sacred places, springs that never fail, even in the worst drought." He paused, studying her face. "We will share this knowledge, in exchange for peace. True peace, not the paper lies your government makes." "The town won't listen. They'd rather die than accept help from—" She caught herself. "From savages?" His smile was bitter now. "Yes, we know, but dying land makes even proud men reconsider. We have already spoken to 3 ranches. Desperate men hear better than comfortable ones. Why are you really here?" The question escaped before she could stop it. His expression softened fractionally. "The drums called," he repeated. "But perhaps they spoke your name." Samuel stepped forward. "If you know where water is, prove it. Our well's about dry. Show us you speak truth." Silent Crow regarded him steadily. "You have your father's courage, and your sister's suspicion." He moved to his horse, retrieving a leather bag. "Tonight, when the moon rises, I will show you." Just like that. Samuel's voice dripped skepticism. "You'll reveal sacred secrets to us." "Not to you." Silent Crow's eyes found Maggie again. "To her." "Because the earth remembers kindness, even across years of silence." He mounted his horse in one smooth motion. Before riding away, he spoke once more. "The cottonwoods still stand. They remember too." Then they were gone, vanishing into the dust as quickly as they'd appeared, leaving Maggie and Samuel standing in the settling haze. "You can't seriously be considering this," Samuel said. "Our cattle are dying. We're dying. If there's even a chance, it's a trap. Or worse, false hope. And even if it's real, what then? The town finds out you're consorting with Indians again. They'll run us out if they don't hang us first." Maggie thought of Robert's proposal, of California, of all the safe, sensible choices that led nowhere but deeper into dust. "Maybe it's time to stop living for the town's approval. Maggie, I'm going tonight." She faced her brother squarely. "You can come or not, but I'm going." That night, as the moon rose pale through the dust, Maggie walked toward the cottonwoods. Samuel followed, grumbling but loyal, rifle across his back. The grove looked skeletal in the drought, leaves long gone, but the trees themselves endured. Silent Crow waited alone, his warriors nowhere to be seen. He'd traded his ceremonial dress for practical clothing, but the crow feather still adorned his hair. "You kept it," he said, gesturing to where her own feather showed above her collar. "A reminder," she admitted, "of things that might have been, perhaps still might be." He moved toward the largest cottonwood, the one where he'd left his farewell message. "Come, both of you." He led them to a spot between the roots and began to dig with his hands. Samuel started to help, but Silent Crow stopped him. "No, this must be done properly." He spoke words in Comanche, reverent and rhythmic. As he dug, 3 feet down, the soil changed, becoming darker, cooler. At 4 feet, water began to seep. Impossible, Samuel breathed. We've dug wells twice this deep and found nothing. Because you dig without listening. Silent Crow said, the earth speaks to those who know its language. Here, the old waters run deep, protected by rock and root. Your wells missed them by feet, chasing surface water that fled long ago. He showed them the signs, subtle changes in vegetation, the way certain rocks aligned, how the cottonwoods grew in specific patterns, knowledge accumulated over generations, sacred and practical combined. Why share this? Samuel asked. Your people could keep this secret. Let us all dry up and blow away. Because the land doesn't care about the color of suffering. Silent Crow replied, when the earth dies, all die. My grandfather saw this in visions. Cooperation or mutual destruction. No other paths remain. He stood, muddy to the elbows, and looked at Maggie. This is one spring of many. We will teach those willing to learn. But trust must flow both ways. The town will want to take them all, Maggie warned. Claim them, fence them, control them. Then the water will hide again. These springs exist because we've protected them. Use them wisely. Greed will dry them faster than any drought. As they walked back toward the ranch, Silent Crow fell into step beside Maggie while Samuel ranged ahead, keeping watch. 5 years, she said softly. I thought I'd dreamed it all. Dreams can be patient, like seeds in drought, waiting for the right moment to grow. He paused. You never married. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. No, though not for lack of trying on the town's part. And now there's a good man who offers security, survival, everything a woman should want, but not what your heart wants. She stopped walking. My heart doesn't get a vote, not in this world. In which world, then? He faced her fully, moonlight carving his features in silver and shadow. The old world dies around us. Margaret, perhaps what grows from its dust will have room for hearts that call across boundaries. That's a beautiful dream, but I have to live in reality. Reality is 3 dying cattle and a dry well. Reality is a town that would rather perish than change. Is that worth preserving? Before she could answer, Samuel's sharp whistle warned of his return. The moment shattered, leaving only the taste of possibilities on the desert wind. As Silent Crow prepared to leave, he made a formal offer. 3 days. Bring whoever will listen to the red rocks north of here. We will teach the finding of water. Those who learn with good hearts may know the location of springs. Those who come with greed will find only stone. He mounted his horse, then looked down at Maggie one last time. The drums called me back. Yes, but I would have come anyway. Some songs, once begun, demand completion. Then he was gone, leaving Maggie standing in the moonlight, caught between dying worlds and the dangerous hope of something new. In 3 days, everything would change, one way or another. The drought had stripped away pretense, leaving only essential truths. And the most essential truth of all was this. The heart, like hidden water, would find its way to the surface, no matter how deep it had been buried. The storm arrived without warning on a night when the air hung heavy as wet wool. Maggie woke to thunder that shook the house and lightning that turned darkness into blinding day. But it wasn't the storm that sent ice through her veins. It was the orange glow on the horizon and the acrid smell of smoke. Fire! Samuel's voice cracked through the house. The town's burning! They dressed frantically, grabbing whatever they could carry. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing, driving walls of dust mixed with smoke. Through the chaos, Maggie could see multiple fires, not the random strikes of lightning, but deliberate blazes set to buildings throughout Cedar Ridge. Raiders! Someone screamed through the darkness. Indians attacking! But even as panic seized her heart, Maggie noticed something wrong. The attack pattern made no sense for Comanche warriors. Too scattered, too focused on property rather than strategic targets. And the timing, just days after Silent Crow's offer of help, felt like more than coincidence. They reached town to find chaos. Men fired rifles at shadows while women and children huddled in the church. Several buildings were fully engulfed, including the general store where old Mr. Porter was trapped on the second floor. Without thinking, Maggie plunged toward the burning building, but strong hands caught her arms. She turned to find Robert Mackenzie, his face soot-streaked and grim. "It's too late," he shouted over the roar of flames. "The whole structure's coming down." As if to prove his words, the store's roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. Maggie's cry of anguish was lost in the crash. "Where's the sheriff?" Samuel demanded. "Where's the fire brigade?" "Sheriff's dead," Robert replied flatly. "Found him with an arrow in his back. As for the brigade, half the men are drunk, the other half shooting at ghosts." Through the smoke and confusion, Maggie caught glimpses of the attackers. Her heart sank. They wore feathers and war paint, but their movements were wrong. Their tactics crude. These weren't trained warriors, but something else. Something worse. "Those aren't real Comanche," she said suddenly. Robert's grip on her arm tightened painfully. "What would you know about real Comanche?" Before she could answer, a figure emerged from the smoke. One of the warriors. His war paint running in the heat, revealing pale skin beneath. He raised a rifle toward them, and Maggie recognized him with shock. Jake Morrison, one of the town's hired guns, a man who'd do anything for money. The revelation came too late. The rifle cracked, and Robert shoved Maggie aside. Taking the bullet meant for her. He crumpled to the ground, blood spreading across his shirt. "No." Maggie dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against the wound. Robert's eyes found hers, surprisingly peaceful. "Always protecting you," he whispered. "Even from yourself." His hand touched her cheek briefly before falling limp. Rage filled the void where grief would later live. Maggie grabbed Robert's pistol and fired at Morrison, who fled into the smoke. Around them, the false raid continued its destruction, designed to look like Indian violence while achieving very different goals. Then, cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk, came a sound that raised every hair on Maggie's neck. A true Comanche war cry, fierce and pure. Silent Crow and his warriors thundered into town, not as attackers but as salvation. They moved with deadly precision, cutting down the false raiders, exposing the deception with every stroke. The painted bandits, faced with real warriors, scattered like leaves before a hurricane. Silent Crow found Maggie still kneeling beside Robert's body. Without a word, he pulled her to her feet, his eyes taking in the scene with swift understanding. "This was not us," he said urgently. "You know this." "I know." Her voice came out raw. "But will they?" The question answered itself as townspeople emerged from hiding, saw the Comanche warriors among the bodies, and drew their own conclusions. Shouts of rage and fear filled the air. Guns swung toward the warriors who had just saved them. "Stand down!" Maggie screamed, stepping between the mob and Silent Crow. "They came to help. The real attackers were white men dressed as Indians." "Lies, mister." Jameson pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with hate. "She's been corrupted by them. Can't trust a word she says." "Look at the bodies." Samuel joined his sister, rifle raised but pointed at the ground. "Look at their skin under the paint. These are hired guns, not Comanche." But mob mentality had taken hold. The crowd pressed forward, and Maggie knew with cold certainty that logic would not prevail. Not tonight, not with blood fresh on the ground and fear-ruling hearts. Silent Crow spoke rapidly to his warriors in Comanche. They began to withdraw, but he remained, his hand finding Maggie's. "Come with us," he said urgently. "Now, before it's too late. I can't leave Sam." "Go," her brother said fiercely. "I'll hold them off. Explain what really happened. Someone has to stay, be the voice of reason. But you, they'll string you up for a traitor." "Go!" The mob surged closer. Someone fired a shot that whistled past Maggie's ear. Silent Crow made the decision for her, pulling her onto his horse and spurring toward the darkness beyond the burning town. "No!" Maggie struggled, watching her brother grow smaller, standing alone against the madness. "Samuel, he is strong," Silent Crow said, his arm iron around her waist. "And they need someone to blame less than they need someone to lead." He will survive. They rode hard through the storm, lightning illuminating their path in stark, white bursts. Behind them, Cedar Ridge burned, not from Comanche torches, but from the greed and hatred of those who profited from perpetual conflict, miles from town, in a hidden canyon where his warriors waited. Silent Crow finally stopped. Maggie slid from the horse, legs shaking, the full weight of the night crashing over her. Robert dead, her home lost, her brother facing down a mob, everything destroyed in a single, orchestrated catastrophe. This was planned, she said numbly. Someone wanted to destroy the peace before it could begin. Yes. Silent Crow's face was granite in the firelight. Someone who profits from our war. Who loses if we find understanding? The land grabbers, the ones who've been buying up failed ranches. Understanding dawned like bitter sunrise. If peace came, if we shared water, people could stay, but chaos and drought drive them off cheap. Your mind sees clearly, even through grief. He studied her with those deep, still eyes. I'm sorry for the man who died. He loved you. He was a good man, Maggie whispered. He deserved better than dying for a lie. Many will die for lies before truth wins. This is the way of changing worlds. Silent Crow moved closer, not touching but offering presence. The question now, what do you choose? Maggie looked back toward the glow of the burning town, then at the warriors around her. Men who'd risked everything to expose a deception, to save people who hated them. I choose truth, she said firmly, even if it costs everything. It already has. Silent Crow reminded her gently, you cannot go back. That world is closed to you now. Then I'll help build a better one. She met his eyes, seeing in them not just the boy who'd kissed her under the moon, but the leader he'd become. Teach me everything, the language, the customs, the knowledge of water. If I'm to be branded a traitor, let me earn it by bringing your peoples together. A ghost of his old smile touched his lips. The drums spoke truly. You are the bridge the grandfathers dreamed. As dawn broke gray and smoky over the desert, Maggie Sullivan ceased to exist. In her place stood something new, a woman between worlds, carrying grief and hope in equal measure, ready to fight for a future that transcended the bitter boundaries of the past. The storm had passed, leaving destruction in its wake. But storms also brought change, washing away the old to make room for new growth. And in the hidden canyon, a Silent Crow began teaching her the first words of his language. Maggie felt the first drops of a different kind of rain, the rain of possibility in a land dying of thirst for understanding. Behind them, smoke rose from Cedar Ridge like a prayer or a curse. Ahead lay the unknown territory of a love that demanded everything and promised nothing certain except this. Some bridges, once built, could never be burned. The war drums had called, and she had answered, not as the white woman she'd been or the Comanche she could never fully become, but as something else, something necessary. A translator not just of words but of worlds, standing in the space between, holding both sides until they could learn to hold themselves. The price was exile. The reward was truth. And in Silent Crow's steady presence beside her, the possibility of a love that transcended every boundary mankind could build. The real war was just beginning. Not between races, but between those who profited from hatred and those who dared to dream of peace. And Maggie, no longer Margaret Sullivan, but not yet anything else, would fight it with the only weapons that mattered: courage, truth, and the stubborn insistence that love could grow even in the harshest ground. The drums had called, and finally, fully, she had answered. The weeks following the fire transformed Cedar Ridge into a cauldron of suspicion and hate. Samuel Sullivan stood in what remained of the general store, helping board up windows against both weather and the darker storms brewing in men's hearts. His sister's absence hung over the town like smoke that wouldn't clear. Traitor's brother. Someone spat as they passed. Samuel kept hammering, each strike of the nail a small act of defiance. He'd told the truth about the false raid until his throat was raw, shown anyone who'd listened the evidence, the white skin beneath the paint, the shoddy imitation of Comanche tactics, the convenient timing. Some believed him, Most didn't want to. Sullivan, Mr. Jameson's voice cracked like a whip across the square. The banker approached with 2 hired guns flanking him, their hands resting on pistol grips. Time we had a talk about your sister. Nothing to talk about, Samuel said evenly. She's gone. Gone where? To her savage lover? Planning more attacks? Samuel set down his hammer carefully, aware of the growing crowd. Mr. Jameson, you know as well as I do that wasn't a real Comanche raid. You probably know better, considering some of those dead warriors were on your payroll last month. The banker's face flushed purple. You accusing me of something, boy. Just observing. Funny how the raids always hit folks who won't sell their land. Funny how you always have cash ready to buy when they finally give up. One of the hired guns stepped forward, but Jameson waved him back. Your family's caused enough trouble. That ranch of yours might be time you considered selling before something unfortunate happens, like what happened to the Hendersons or the Parkers. Samuel met his eyes steadily. My sister was right about one thing. This drought's shown everyone's true nature, and yours is uglier than any painted face. That night, Samuel barricaded himself in the ranch house, rifle across his knees, waiting for the unfortunate thing Jameson had promised. It came just before dawn. Not violence, but something worse. Sheriff Watson, Jameson's newly appointed replacement, arrived with an eviction notice. Bank's calling in your loan, Watson said, not meeting Samuel's eyes. You've got 3 days to pay in full or vacate. We're not behind on payments. Terms changed. Times being what they are, bank needs to protect its interests. Watson shifted uncomfortably. I'm sorry. Sam, if your sister hadn't... Well, if things were different. After he left, Samuel sat in the kitchen where his mother had died, where his father had told stories, where Maggie had dreamed of things beyond the narrow borders of Cedar Ridge. The house felt like a tomb already. Meanwhile, 50 miles north in the hidden canyon that served as Silent Crow's band's refuge, Maggie learned what it meant to live between worlds. The Comanche women watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. She couldn't blame them. How many of their families had been torn apart by people who looked like her? You bring danger, an elder woman named White Rain told her bluntly while teaching her to prepare pemmican. Your presence divides us. I know, Maggie replied in halting Comanche. She'd been studying the language with desperate intensity, knowing words were her only bridge. But division already exists. Maybe understanding can heal it. White Rain's hands never paused in their work. Pretty words. Your people speak many pretty words before they take what they want. There was no answer to that truth, so Maggie kept working, blistering her soft hands on the hard labor of survival. She learned to scrape hides, gather roots, read the subtle signs of water in an unforgiving land, and slowly, grudgingly, some began to accept her presence, if not her person. Silent Crow watched her struggles with eyes that missed nothing. In the evenings, he continued her education, not just language, but history, philosophy, the complex web of relationships that bound the Comanche to their land. Your people see ownership, he explained one night as they sat by a small fire. Lines on maps, papers that say this is mine, that is yours. We see relationship. The land owns us as much as we own it. Is that why you're willing to share the water knowledge, even after everything? Because the land is dying. When the body is sick, you don't ask which part deserves medicine. He paused, studying her face in the firelight. Your brother, do you want to know? Maggie's heart clenched. Through careful scouting, Silent Crow's warriors kept track of events in Cedar Ridge. Tell me. He stands strong, but alone. The town turns against him. Soon they will take your ranch. Tears burned her eyes. I've cost him everything. No, greed costs everything. You chose truth over comfortable lies. His hand covered hers, warm and steady. This is not easy path, but it is right path. 3 nights later, the camp erupted in argument. A young warrior named Red Sky had lost his brother in a cavalry attack the previous spring. He pointed at Maggie during the council, his voice sharp with grief and rage. She learns our ways to betray us. Her people send her a spy. My brother's blood cries out against this. Maggie understood enough to follow his words, to feel their sting. She started to speak, but Silent Crow touched her arm. In council, she had no voice unless granted. Red Sky speaks his pain. Silent Crow said formally, "We hear it, we honor it, but pain makes poor decisions. This woman risked everything for truth. She stands exiled from her people for refusing their lies." "Words," Red Sky spat. "Always she has words, but when soldiers come, will words stop bullets?" An elder named Spotted Horse raised his hand for silence. "I have lived through many seasons of war and few of peace. This woman, I have watched her. She works hard, learns humbly, brings no harm. Maybe she brings no great help either. But in these times, no harm is something." The debate raged on, but Maggie heard the deeper fear beneath. Generations of betrayal, promises broken, trust shattered again and again. How could they believe in any bridge when all previous ones had burned? As the council dispersed without resolution, Maggie walked to the edge of camp, needing space to breathe. The stars spread above like scattered seeds, and somewhere in the distance, coyotes sang their ancient songs. "You should not be alone." Silent Crow's voice came soft behind her. "Red Sky's anger runs deep. He's right to be angry. I would be too." She turned to face him. "Maybe this is impossible. Maybe the divide is too wide. Maybe." He stepped closer, his presence solid as stone. "But we must try. The alternative is death for all. Why do you believe in this? In me, really?" For a long moment, he was quiet. "Then, when I was young, my grandmother told me a vision. A white bird and a black crow would dance in the storm, and from their dance would come rain to heal the land. I thought it was only a story." His fingers touched her pale hair. "Then I met you under the moon, and the vision became real. So, I'm no mystical bird. Silent Crow. I'm just a woman who doesn't fit anywhere anymore. That is what makes you valuable. Those who fit in boxes cannot build bridges between them." He cupped her face gently. "But the cost is high. Always the bridge builders pay in loneliness." "I'm not alone," she whispered. "Not with you." He kissed her then, under the vast sky. And for a moment the weight of two worlds lifted, but even as she lost herself in his embrace, Maggie heard the drums in the distance, not calling for celebration but for vigilance. The war between worlds was far from over. The next morning brought dire news. A runner arrived, exhausted and bloody. The army was mobilizing, planning a massive campaign to force all Comanche onto reservations. Any band found roaming free would be considered hostile, to be subdued by any means necessary. The camp exploded into activity. Some advocated fighting, others fleeing deeper into the mountains. A few suggested negotiation, though history showed the futility of that path. "What about the water?" Maggie asked during the hurried council. "The knowledge you offered to share, if we could prove cooperation works." "Maybe." Too late. Red Sky interrupted. "Your people choose war. They always choose war." "Not all of them," Maggie insisted, forgetting protocol in her urgency. "There are others like my brother, like the doctor who spoke for truth. If we could reach them, show them another way." "With what?" another warrior demanded. "Pretty words? Promises? We have chest full of broken promises from your people." Spotted Horse raised his hand again. "The woman speaks of action, not words." "What action?" Maggie's mind raced. Then, with clarity that felt like lightning, "A demonstration, not hidden, but public. Show them the water finding. Yes, but more. Show them we can work together. That we must work together." "They would attack us," someone protested. "Not if we had witnesses." "Good people from the town, ones tired of the violence. My brother could gather them, and..." She paused, knowing the risk. "I would stand with you, publicly. Let them see a white woman choosing cooperation over conflict." Silence greeted this suggestion. Then Silent Crow spoke. "It would mean revealing yourself. The town believes you kidnapped or dead, to appear willingly with us." "Would destroy any chance of ever going back," Maggie finished. "I know, but maybe that's what it takes. Someone willing to burn all bridges except the one that matters. The council continued long into the night. When it finally ended, the decision was made. They would attempt Maggie's plan. One last try for peace before the storm of war swept everything away. As the camp settled into uneasy sleep, Maggie stood again under the stars, feeling the weight of what was coming. In 3 days, she would ride back toward Cedar Ridge, not as Margaret Sullivan, but as something new, a bridge between worlds, fragile as hope but necessary as rain. The drums echoed across the canyon, carrying messages to other bands, other hopes. And in their rhythm, Maggie heard both ending and beginning, the death of who she'd been and the birth of who she must become. The price was everything. The possibility was everything. And in between, in the space where bridges are built, stood love, patient, dangerous, and absolutely necessary. The battle came at dawn, 3 days before the planned peace demonstration. Maggie woke to the thunder of hooves and the crack of rifles. Cavalry, 2 full companies, had found the canyon. "Move! Everyone move!" Silent Crow's voice cut through the chaos as warriors grabbed weapons and women gathered children. The careful plans for peace shattered against the immediate need for survival. Maggie fumbled for the rifle Silent Crow had taught her to use, her hands shaking. Through the smoke of morning fires, she could see blue uniforms flooding the canyon entrance. They'd been betrayed. Someone had sold the location of the refuge. "The old path through the rocks," White Rain shouted, leading a group of elders and children toward a narrow crevice in the canyon wall. "Quickly!" But the soldiers had anticipated escape routes. Gunfire erupted from the rim above, cutting off retreat. They were trapped. Silent Crow appeared at Maggie's side, war paint hastily applied, his face a mask of deadly purpose. "Stay with the women. If we fall, take who you can and run for the deep desert." "I'm not hiding," Maggie said fiercely. "This is my fight too. Your fight is to survive, to bear witness." He gripped her shoulders. "Promise me." Before she could answer, a voice amplified by a speaking trumpet echoed across the canyon. "Comanche raiders! By order of the United States Army, surrender immediately. We have you surrounded. Resistance will be met with deadly force." "Raiders?" Red Sky snarled, notching an arrow. "We raid nothing. We hide like rabbits, and still they come." The first wave of soldiers entered the canyon in formation. Silent Crow raised his rifle, and the morning exploded into violence. The battle was fierce but brief. Outnumbered 3-1, fighting from poor positions, the Comanche warriors fell back step by bloody step. Maggie found herself pressed against the canyon wall with a group of women, firing at any blue uniform that came too close, trying not to think about the fact that these were her people she was fighting. Then she saw him, Samuel, riding with the cavalry, his face twisted with anguish as he searched the chaos. Their eyes met across the battlefield, and time seemed to stop. "Maggie!" He spurred toward her, heedless of the crossfire. "What have you done? What I had to!" She shouted back, keeping her rifle raised but not aimed at him. "Sam, this is wrong. These people aren't raiders. They're families. They're harboring a kidnapped woman." He gestured desperately. "That's what Jameson told everyone, that they took you by force. I came to save you." Understanding crashed over Maggie like ice water. Of course, Jameson had twisted the narrative, used her disappearance to justify the attack he'd always wanted. And Samuel, desperate to believe his sister was stolen rather than choosing to leave. "I'm not kidnapped," she cried. "I'm here by choice. Sam, you have to stop this." But her words were lost in renewed gunfire. A young warrior fell beside her, blood blooming across his chest. Without thinking, Maggie dropped her weapon and pressed her hands against the wound, trying to stop the flow. The dying warrior looked up at her with confused eyes. It was Red Sky, who'd argued so fiercely against her presence. "White woman," he gasped. "Why?" "Because you're human," she said, tears streaming. "Because this is wrong. Because—" A rifle butt caught her across the temple, sending her sprawling. Through blurred vision, she saw a soldier standing over her, weapon raised for another blow. Then Silent Crow was there, knife flashing, the soldier falling away. "Can you ride?" Silent Crow pulled her upright, blood running from a gash on his arm. Yes, but no arguments. We retreat now or die here. Around them, the battle was turning into a slaughter. The organized resistance had broken into scattered fights. Bodies littered the canyon floor. Blue and bronze tangled in death's equality. Silent Crow whistled sharply, a signal that brought his remaining warriors gathering for one last push. They would try to punch through the line, create an opening for the survivors to escape. When we charge, you run, he told Maggie. Take whoever you can. Head for Skeleton Ridge. We'll find you if we can. I won't leave you. You will. His eyes blazed with fierce love. You will survive and tell the truth of this day. Promise me, Margaret, promise. Through tears and blood, she promised. The charge was magnificent and doomed. 20 warriors against 60 soldiers, but they fought with the fury of men defending everything. For a few precious moments, a gap opened in the line. Now! White Rain grabbed Maggie's arm. We go now! Maggie ran, half carrying a wounded child, herding others through the gap. Behind them, the sounds of battle crescendoed. She looked back once to see Silent Crow still fighting, 3 soldiers converging on him. Then they were through, fleeing across the desert as the sun climbed higher, turning the land to bronze and blood. They ran for hours, a ragged group of survivors, mostly women, children, and wounded. Maggie's head throbbed from the rifle blow, but she pushed on, supporting others when they faltered. At Skeleton Ridge, they finally stopped, collapsing in whatever shade they could find. Of the 100 souls who'd woken in the canyon that morning, fewer than 30 had escaped. No warriors among them. They're gone, White Rain said flatly. All our men, gone. Maggie wanted to deny it, to hope, but she'd seen the overwhelming numbers. Silent Crow, Red Sky, Spotted Horse. All the voices from the council silenced in a single morning. As the survivors tended wounds and shared what little water they had, a lone rider appeared on the horizon. Maggie's heart leaped, then sank as she recognized Samuel's familiar silhouette. He approached slowly, hands visible, rifle still in its scabbard. His face was haggard, aged years and hours. Maggie. He dismounted at a safe distance. Please, just listen. Come to finish what you started? White Rain's voice was sharp as flint. I came to... Samuel's voice broke. I didn't know. Jameson said you were taken. Said they were holding you. I thought I was saving you. By slaughtering innocents? Maggie's grief transformed into rage. Children! Sam! You killed children! I didn't fire a shot. Tears ran down his face. When I saw you there, saw you fighting with them, God, Maggie, what have we done? We, she laughed bitterly. There is no we anymore. You chose your side. I chose my sister, or thought I did. He reached into his saddlebag, pulling out a leather pouch. I can't undo today, but I can try to... Here, medical supplies. What I could grab. And this... He held out a rolled paper. Maggie recognized it, the deed to their ranch. Jameson foreclosed yesterday, but I signed it over to you before he could claim it. It's yours. Legal and clear, you and whoever's left. You think paper fixes this? White Rain spat. Your paper is worthless to the dead. I know. Samuel's shoulders slumped. But it's all I have to give. That and a warning. They're coming. More troops. Orders to clear every Comanche from the territory. Dead or reservation. No other choices. He mounted his horse, looking older than their father ever had. I'll tell them you died in the fighting, that I saw your body. Maybe that'll stop them hunting you. Sam, Maggie started, but didn't know how to finish. Too much lay broken between them. I loved you, he said simply. Loved who I thought you were. Maybe someday I'll understand who you really are. He turned his horse. There's a spring at the ranch, hidden, like Silent Crow showed us. Keep them alive. Maggie, keep someone alive. Then he was gone, riding back toward the world that no longer held a place for either of them, as the sun began its descent, painting the desert in shades of loss. Maggie helped organize the survivors. They would go to the ranch, What else was there? It would provide shelter, water, a place to regroup and mourn. "He may be dead," White Rain said quietly as they prepared to move. "Silent Crow, we should accept this." "No." Maggie's voice was stone. "Not until I see proof. He's survived worse. You love him." It wasn't a question. "I love all of you," Maggie said, and realized it was true. "You became my people when my own people became strangers." White Rain studied her for a long moment. "Then we go to this ranch. We survive. We wait. And when the time comes, we remember, both the love and the blood. Both teach necessary lessons." As they began the slow journey toward what had been the Sullivan Ranch, Maggie heard drums in the distance. Not war drums this time, but mourning drums, carrying the names of the dead to the spirit world. She walked between worlds still, but now those worlds were soaked in blood. The bridge she'd tried to build lay in ruins, but bridges could be rebuilt, if anyone survived to do the building. The drums called, and she answered with each step toward an uncertain future. Somewhere in that uncertainty, she had to believe. Silent Crow still lived, had to believe that from this tragedy. Something could still grow. The alternative was a despair too deep to survive. So she walked and helped others walk, and carried in her heart both American lead and Comanche courage. The sun set on one story. Perhaps tomorrow it would rise on another, if any of them lived to see tomorrow. The Sullivan Ranch had become a sanctuary for the broken. 6 months after the Canyon Massacre, Maggie stood on the porch watching the sun paint the desert gold, counting the small victories that kept despair at bay. 28 souls had survived to reach this place, women, children, and 3 warriors too wounded to fight that terrible morning. Among them was Silent Crow. He'd arrived 2 weeks after the battle, more dead than alive, dragged across the desert by Running Wolf, a warrior who'd lost an eye but not his determination. The bullet wounds had festered, fever had nearly claimed him, but Comanche medicine and Maggie's desperate nursing had pulled him back from the edge. Now he sat in the shade, teaching young Tom Harrison, a white boy orphaned by the same violence that had taken so many Comanche lives, how to fletch arrows. The boy had wandered into their refuge starving and scared, and despite everything, they'd taken him in. Bridges, Maggie had learned, were built one small kindness at a time. "Riders comin'," White Rain announced from her lookout position. The old woman's eyes remained sharp as hawks despite her years. Everyone tensed, hands moving to weapons. But Maggie recognized the lone figure approaching under a white flag, Dr. Bryant from town, the young physician who'd once dared speak against the mob. "Miss Sullivan," he called from a safe distance. "I come in peace, with news and supplies." After careful deliberation, they let him approach. His saddlebags bulged with medical supplies, precious in their scarcity. "The town believes you're dead," he said, unpacking bandages and medicines. "Your brother maintained the fiction until he left for California last month. Told me the truth before he went. Asked me to check on you when I could." Samuel left? The news hurt more than Maggie expected. Couldn't bear it anymore. He said, "The guilt. Jameson's basically running Cedar Ridge now, though there's not much left to run. The drought's worse than ever. Half the town's abandoned." "Doctor," Bryant paused. "But there's something else. The army's pulling back. The campaign against the Comanche is being called off. Too expensive. Too many soldiers dying of disease and desertion. They're offering one last treaty, reservation life, but with water rights and some autonomy. Another treaty." Silent Crow's voice was flat. "Another lie written on paper. Maybe." "Doctor," Bryant admitted. "But the alternative is extinction. And there are some of us, not many, but some, working to make sure this treaty is different, that it's honored." "Why?" White Rain asked bluntly. "Why do you care?" The doctor was quiet for a moment. "Because I've seen what hatred costs, everyone. And because Miss Sullivan was right, we have to find another way, or we all die in this desert." He left more than supplies. He left hope, fragile as spring grass, but real. That night, as they shared a meal of rabbit and prairie turnips. The community that had formed at the ranch revealed itself in small ways. Comanche women teaching white orphans their language, Mexican vaqueros who'd lost their own homes sharing stories with warriors, all bound by loss but building something new. "The world changes," Silent Crow said quietly to Maggie as they walked under stars. His wounds had healed but left scars that pulled when he moved. "Not as we hoped, but it changes still." "Is it enough?" she asked. "This small piece we've made here. It is what we have. We make it enough." He took her hand, his touch still capable of sending fire through her veins. "The old ones say the longest journey begins with one step. This ranch is one step." A week later, they held a ceremony that would have scandalized both societies. Silent Crow and Maggie stood before the mixed community as Spotted Horse's widow, acting as spiritual leader, bound them in both Comanche tradition and with words from Maggie's mother's Bible. "Two worlds join here," the old woman said. "Not easy, not without pain, but necessary. From such unions come new peoples, new hopes." Tom Harrison stood as witness for Maggie, while Running Wolf, one-eyed but proud, stood for Silent Crow. The drums that played were neither purely Comanche nor entirely foreign. They were something new, like the community itself. That night, in the quiet of their room, Silent Crow traced the scars that matched his own, the marks life had left on her body and soul. "No regrets?" he asked. "Every day," she admitted. "But not about this. Never about this." They made love with the desperate tenderness of those who knew how fragile peace could be, how quickly the world could shatter. But for now, in this moment, they were whole. The seasons turned. The ranch became known as a place where water could be found, not just in the ground, but in the human spirit. Travelers of all kinds found brief sanctuary there. Some stayed, adding to their strange family. Others moved on, carrying stories of the place where ancient enemies lived as neighbors. Dr. Bryant visited monthly, bringing news and supplies. The abandoned sections of Cedar Ridge were being settled by Mexican families. Chinese workers fleeing railroad camps, freed slaves seeking new starts. The old order was crumbling, replaced by something more complex but possibly more honest. "Jameson's fighting it," the doctor reported one visit, "but he's losing. Too many people desperate for change, for water, for hope. Your example here, it matters, shows another way is possible." One day, a letter arrived, carried by a traveling preacher. Samuel's handwriting, postmarked from San Francisco. "Maggie, I hope this finds you alive and well. I think of you often, of the choices we both made. I'm working with a group here advocating for Indian rights, trying to make amends in my own way. I know it's not enough. Nothing could be, but I wanted you to know. I understand now. What you saw, what you chose. I wish I'd been brave enough to see it sooner. All my love, Sam." Maggie read it aloud to Silent Crow, tears falling on the worn paper. "He grows wise," Silent Crow said simply. "Pain is a teacher if we let it be." The hardest test came when a band of young Comanche warriors arrived, bitter and desperate, wanting to use the ranch as a base for raids. Silent Crow faced them in council, Maggie at his side. The community ranged behind them. "You offer war," he told them. "We offer life. Choose." Some left, unable to accept a path that included former enemies, but others stayed, slowly won over by full bellies and the sight of their people's children learning alongside white and Mexican youth, all equally dirty from playing by the hidden spring. Years passed. The drought finally broke with torrential rains that turned the desert green. The ranch expanded, becoming a small town in its own right, officially named Harmony Springs, though everyone just called it the Sullivan Place. Maggie stood once more on the porch, older now, watching her daughter chase her son through the vegetable garden. The girl had her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. The boy, adopted from a wagon train massacre, had hair like corn silk and could speak 3 languages before his 6th birthday. "The drums," Silent Crow said. Joining her, His hair was streaked with silver now, but his spirit remained strong. "Do you hear them?" Maggie listened. From the school building came the sound of children singing, a mixture of languages, cultures, voices, the drums of the future, beating out a rhythm of possibility. "I hear them," she said, leaning into his embrace. Dr. Bryant, now mayor of the reorganized Cedar Ridge, had asked them to speak at the dedication of a monument to the massacre, not celebrating violence, but acknowledging truth, mourning all lost to hatred and fear. "Will you go?" Silent Crow asked. "We'll go," Maggie corrected. "Together. Let them see what survived their worst. Let them see what love can build from ashes." As the sun set over Harmony Springs, painting the sky in shades of hope, the drums continued. Not war drums now, but life drums, calling not for vengeance but for justice, not for separation but for the harder work of coming together. The midnight kiss under the cottonwoods had led to this, a place where impossible things became daily reality, where former enemies shared water and bread, where children grew up seeing difference as strength, not threat. It wasn't the grand peace Maggie had once dreamed of. It was smaller, harder won, more precious for its fragility. But it was real, and in a world torn by division, sometimes small real things mattered more than grand dreams. The drums called, and love answered, again and again. Despite everything, love answered. And in that answer lay the hope of all bridges yet to be built, all walls yet to fall, all hearts yet to find their way across the artificial borders that separated the human family. The story that began with a stolen kiss under the moon had become something larger, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, understanding over ignorance, courage over comfort. The drums still call. They always will. The question remains, who will answer? Thank you for listening to this story of love and courage in the Wild West. I'm curious, where are you enjoying this tale? Please comment below and let me know what part of the world you're in as we share this journey together. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more stories that capture the heart and spirit of the American frontier. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Maggie and Silent Crow's story. What touched you most? Share your reflections in the comments below.